All right. Thank you so much for joining today in the discoveries of, say, consciousness, the secrets of consciousness. Thank you for joining, even on this in the middle of everything day, like between Christmas and Old Year. And so this is your weekend off, maybe. I hope so. And so I'm really happy that you're here, that you decided to join, take time to sink into what is offered here, to sink into the peace and quiet, in fact, that is offered. And that is all happening within your consciousness. Now today, the interesting part is that we're talking about remolding your consciousness. And Joel says many times, like there's basically nothing to mold on your consciousness, because consciousness is what is, and that doesn't change. So remolding your consciousness really would be then to see, in fact, or to see what can be trained for you not to step into the temptation to add anything to this consciousness. And you say, like, okay, so what are you talking about? Well, what I'm talking about is Joel actually talks about training your mind, in fact, training your consciousness not to be tempted to pick up any idea that is related to this time and space continuum as your reality. Now that sounds very familiar, like the ones that are using, for instance, A Course in Miracles. You see that training your mind is like, there are 365 lessons. So it's like every day we use that to release your attempt to make any of time and space real as a part of your identity. So Joel brings that up too, and actually I'm happy to hear that. And of course I know where Joel is coming from, whose master is Joel's. That's the same master as also who came to offer the Course in Miracles. Now, why am I sharing this? Because basically it is obvious that the path that we're on is a spiritual path in which you train yourself. Whether you call that mind training, or training your consciousness, I don't really care, because that really is like nomenclature. That is terms that you use. But in fact, the training is the same, of course. Like that is universal. Now, to bring it back to Joel, then we follow what Joel is saying today. Don't be afraid. That's just as easy. It is not difficult to use Joel's words. It is just really amazing that Joel expresses this just a couple of years before A Course in Miracles starts to be written down. That's why I mention it. It's like there's only a couple of years in between. And Joel mentions the urgency of the necessity for training your mind, your consciousness. And 3 years later, there's the start of a taking down of a complete mind training, in fact, facility. That's totally amazing. And yeah, I've mentioned this before, that the lessons of the tapes that Joel uses in 64, for instance, are almost like coming very close to the wording where A Course in Miracles starts. So that's, for me, like wonderful to recognize that, since I use both. And like I said, we're going back to Joel now and leave A Course in Miracles for what it is, but it's completely integrated anyway, in me, of course. So what am I saying now? Remolding your consciousness. See, the thing with, you can say, with mystics is they have to use words, which is difficult because it doesn't state what it actually is. If I say love, if I say, for instance, I used this example before. If I say open, like you need to be open, I can say that while I'm completely closed. So the word open doesn't hold it. It is twice removed from reality. Like it is a symbol of symbols. So the difficulty then with using words always is, we call it remolding consciousness, but actually it isn't remolding consciousness, because consciousness cannot be remolded. Now here's another thing. We have to die daily. Yeah, we don't really mean dying daily, but we use this as a term to die daily to your human ideas, to valuing your human ideas. So it's not really like a death. We use this as a way of expression. So this is what I want to mention. It's like this is always what you will encounter with no matter who you're listening to. So that takes away the possibility, basically, to use the words to compare. Or to use the words like, no, this one is saying this and that mystic is saying that. Like, in essence, we're talking here the same thing, probably. And so this is always... There's always something, because language is so limited in that sense, because it doesn't state what it actually is. So the same with love. If I would give a description of love, it would be a definition, it would be a limitation. So that isn't what love is, because love is unlimited. And on and on and on. So this we encountered today too, and what Joel is trying to express with the words that he uses. All right, so today we start with a contemplation. I used part of the tape that we're listening to for 484B, Remolding Consciousness. So we use the words of Joel in this contemplation. And now here's the thing, like, how do I use this? Well, see, in the presentation that I put together this morning for me. This morning I put it together. So the most important part for myself here in this is the absolute loveliness that I feel that Joel's sharing. Like, it's not about the words, but it's really, where is he coming from? That's such a loving place I recognize very well. It's like, I love the way that he shares this. Even though you might have a different experience, but it's like, this is the most, say, essential part that I'm trying to express here in a way. I find ways to express this in a very lovely way.
Once we bring about a change of consciousness in ourselves to where we understand that our heritage is spiritual, God is our creator, our creative principle, and our qualities and quantities are derived from the spiritual source. Our parents are just the human frames through which we were sent into expression. We weren't sent into expression by them, but through them. We were sent into expression by our Creator. Your father and my father, according to the Master's teaching. The one Father, the one, yours and mine. We do not have separate parentages. Not even if we're white or black or Oriental or Occidental. We have only one Father, one creative principle. The entire experience of the movement from material consciousness to spiritual consciousness is a remolding of consciousness. Again, in mystical language, You must die daily. You must be reborn of the Spirit. Now, actually, you do not die daily. All you do is let the untruths that you have accepted, the myths that you have accepted, you let those die out of your consciousness. Your consciousness remains just what it always was. Only now, instead of believing that the sky sits on the ocean and the sky sits on the mountain, now you look out and you say, oh no, education destroyed my ignorance on that subject. In other words, I have died to those beliefs. But it isn't a dying process. It is a letting of those ignorances die out of your consciousness so that into your consciousness may be born the truth. In the same way, as you start a regular program of training your consciousness to accept one power and that one spirit, and of course resist the temptation to use that power on anything because there isn't any other power to use it on, as you train yourself to resist the temptation to use that spiritual power, you are not dying, you are not being reborn. These old beliefs are being permitted to die out of your consciousness, and truth is permitted to be born into your consciousness. But when you're all through, you'll find you are still you. Your consciousness is still your consciousness. Only now you are devoid of some of your ignorances, and you are fulfilled with some truth.
All right, thank you so much for joining in this way with this contemplation. So you will hear this part again too within the context of the whole talk, but I wanted to take it out just to bring it under attention and emphasize it in that way. All right, so the next part is then I found in peace in Consciousness is What I Am. That's one of the books of Joel, and I want to share that with you since that is also very helpful. So here's this sixth secret then. Remolding consciousness. This involves consciously correcting deeply ingrained false beliefs and old conditioning, the letter of truth, until the truth falls from the head into the heart and becomes a spontaneous, realized state of being. So this is in fact the correction that takes place for you to let the letter of truth come forward in your consciousness. Joel says it here, here it is defined in a different way. Joel uses these words, until the truth falls from the head into the heart and becomes a spontaneous, realized state of being. So that is the remolding of consciousness that is taking place in you. One of the steps leading up to living by grace rather than by taking thought is to keep the mind imbued with truth. In all the writings of the Infinite Way, it has been made clear that we never outgrow the letter of truth, that is, the principles. We must always have them as a rock and as a foundation. The mind cannot choose this. We must choose, and we must hold the principle of one power. Every time the suggestion of another power is presented to us, we answer with, no, I have accepted God as the only power. As we abide in this principle, we are rebuilding our state of consciousness. We are dying, here it is again, dying to the belief in two powers, and are being reborn into the consciousness of one power. Because I will use this, it's the shift from belief in two powers, opposing powers, like thinking that there's something outside of you that you need to defend against, or that can have power over you. We'll see this later too in one of the Bible parts that I use to illustrate this, because it is like everything that's going on in the world has an effect on you if you believe it is a power outside of you. So everything that's happening, as long as you place it outside of you, you think it can do something with you. It can take something away from you. So like there's another power, in other words. If you're completely centered and aligned in this one power, then suddenly this world dissolves, in fact. It has no power any longer, not over you. So this is the process that's taking place, and that's why we need this training. Like you have to be confronted with this all the time. Coming back to the letter of truth, like what is going on here? There's only one power. There's not another power. There's no opposing power. Power does not oppose. And see, that has an effect on how you experience the world. And we will see that in the next series too, because everything comes down to that. Like, my kingdom is not of this world. So that means the fulfillment lies within me. I don't have to look outside for fulfillment. If I look there, I will be disappointed in one way or the other, because it's never going to fulfill. Now I'm going back to myself, living by grace, like coming back to myself, recognizing what is going on within my consciousness. More and more become aware of the love of God that is with me, that is always with me, without an opposite. It always tells me what to do, where to go, what to say, and all this. It's like everything is given to me in this way, because now I'm open to receive that. I'm not confused about outside power, because what does that do? It takes your attention away. It's screaming for attention, and if you give it attention, you're lost in it. You're literally making that your reality. Now you come back to it, to yourself, and recognize, no, there's only one power. This takes care of duality. This takes care of thinking in terms of opposites. It literally dissolves the whole conflict, which is incredible that you can actually learn that. That is given to you. You were the lucky one this is given to. And so, receive it and practice it and see how it works. And because everything will not only become easier for you in that sense, but the most important thing is that it is real what is presented. All your belief in outside powers isn't real. It is just a temptation to believe that there is something else, someone else, some power outside of you that can do something to you. It's a complete delusion. Now that's why this is so great. So another part of your consciousness where a secret is really being given. How can you talk about this? You can only share about this if this has become your experience. Now you have an option. You know there's such thing as the one power instead of an opposing power, or something that can attack you. Now you hear this. Now you can let that idea in, because it will bring you to the reality of you, not anything else. The mind cannot choose. So the mind cannot choose to do this. We must choose. And we must hold the principle of one power. So deep insights, this is what I share too. Accepting God as the only power implies a realization that there is nothing and no one that can attack you. This takes away the old habit of defending yourself. Taking thought for our actions is the obstacle to living the spontaneous realized state of being, the living by grace. If you take thought, if you try to work this out, if you try to defend yourself, all this is an obstacle to living the spontaneous realized state of being, the state of grace. Literally, that's the thing that's in the way. So, huge lesson to learn today. All right, so now let's bring in some science, because how is that working? Isn't it suddenly busy at the door? So here's the thing then, because we're talking science now here. What effect does that have on your physicality, for instance? That will be a science question. Like, if you imagine that normally you would respond to something that comes so-called from outside of you, you become fearful. You feel this adrenaline going through you. You can fight or flight. And that was the basic response to situations that seems to be threatening. But if there's nothing outside of you, that changes. Now, what effect does that have on your physicality? It must have an effect. And yes, they measured it. So they've done a lot of research on this, because it is the basis of why, for instance, meditation helps you to calm down in your heart rate and all this, like why your whole system quiets down if you start to actually practice meditation. That would be one thing. But here, in specific points like believe in one power, like that has an incredible effect, because if I'm not disturbed any longer with anything that seems to be coming from outside myself, then something happens. Now, today we use the example of neuroscience. And I don't know if you're an expert on neuroscience, but it's more like you can imagine that there are certain pathways in your brain, there are certain pathways that help you to do things, to respond in ways to common situations, so you know, like you have to take your coat on when you go outside when it's cold. Just as an example, like that's almost like an automatic pathway in your brain. Now here it is then too with situations that are threatening to you. It's like you have a response to that. It is completely connected to one of the hormonal glands in your brain, the amygdala. And you don't have to remember this, but it's more like something is activated. That's why you get this adrenaline rush in your blood when something seems to be threatening to you. Like, it can only seem that way, because what can really be threatening is if there is nothing outside of you. But anyway, so that normally that pathway is very active, because you need to be alert and you need to respond to situations that are actually threatening you. So that's a very very old pathway that you learn as a child, for instance, because you have to watch out when you cross the road, all this. Now, when your consciousness shifts and actually doing the lessons that Joel was teaching us, recognizing there is no power outside of myself, like there's only one power, and you come into the quiet of that, you start to allow the peace to come to you in that. The pathways that were there for the immediate response in emergency, so to speak, start to dissolve. They literally are not used any longer, and the brain is so efficient that immediately turns it off. Immediately, at least, it turns it off. Step by step, it is turned off, like it's not a pathway anymore. So that means there's no disruptance any longer from this so-called emergency you start to see this in a different way. And that has an impact on your physical system. So I only use this neuroscience example just because I know about it. Otherwise I wouldn't share with you about this. Pruning the conditioning pathways. Neuroplasticity is the way that your brain processes stimuli. It is always efficient in its ways. It operates on the principle of neurons, like the nerves that fire together, wire together. They are connected. Conversely, neurons that stop firing together lose their tether, like they're not connected any longer. Changing your habits and beliefs has a big impact on how your brain is functioning. When you stop chasing a false belief, the synaptic density of those specific neural pathways begin to decrease. The brain, being energy efficient, stops maintaining the metabolic infrastructure for those old thoughts loops. It starts to disappear. Jesus had no fear for anything that was coming his way because he was aware of the fact that there's only one power. And that is literally what he brought here. He stood for that. He was exemplifying that to all of us. He would stand there. No matter what happened to him, he would not be afraid. He would stand in it and let things change. So here I have an example, because now you see the disciples, for instance, they were full of fear. But he adjusted, he helped them with that too. And that's lovely to see that, because you might recognize yourself in it. Imagine that you're on a boat, you see somebody coming at you in the middle of the night, it's stormy, and now what happens? Is this a threat or not? So there's some increase of, of adrenaline in your blood, you could say, if you look at it in a scientific way. That actually make you ready to do whatever needs to be done in order to protect yourself. But then something else happens. And this is why I call this like the miracles with Jesus. So there's another example I will share afterwards, and that is the temptation of Jesus. Is there a power outside of you? Is there a devil outside of Jesus? But they're lovely to read too, that's why I love to share it. Jesus walks on water. When evening came, his disciples went down to the sea, got into a boat, and started across the sea to Capernaum. It was now dark, and Jesus had not yet come to them. The sea became rough, because a strong wind was blowing. When they had rowed about 3 or 4 miles, they saw Jesus walking on the sea and coming near the boat, and they were frightened. But he said to them, "It is I. Don't be afraid." Like literally, there's nothing outside of you. It's I. Then they were glad to take him into the boat, and immediately the boat was at the land to which they were going. See, that's beautiful. So everything changed when they realized that it is I, that there is nothing outside of you. Everything changes because there's no threat any longer. Yeah, so here's the temptation of Jesus. I'll read it here from my phone. Then Jesus was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. And after fasting 40 days and 40 nights, he was hungry. And the tempter came and said to him, "If you are the Son of God, command these stones to become loaves of bread." But he answered, "It is written, man shall not eat by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God." Then the devil took him to the holy city and set him on a pinnacle of the temple, and said to him, "If you are the Son of God, throw yourself down, for it is written, he will command his angels concerning you, and on their hands they will bear you up, lest you strike your foot against the stone." What Jesus said to him, "Again it is written, you shall not put the Lord your God to the test." Again the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their glory. And he said to them, "All these I will give to you if you will fall down and worship me." Then Jesus said to him, "Begone, Satan, for it is written, you shall worship the Lord your God, and him only shall you serve." Then the devil left him, and behold, angels came and were ministering him. When you are no longer a slave of fear, miracles of love are within your easy reach. When you are no longer a slave of fear, miracles of love are within your easy reach. Falling from the head into the heart is no longer chasing earthly dreams of limitation, but instead opening the door to the kingdom within. Your happiness is in aligning your will with the will of God. So falling from the head into the heart. I really love that expression, because it is like it is the step that you take from intellect to your direct experience of what is being shared. So that makes all the difference. So this is our introduction. It's like remolding your consciousness is where we started with. Remolding your consciousness is really like not being tempted any longer to see anything outside yourself, but basically coming to the core of you, the core of your being, and recognizing that peace dwells up from within. And literally, by practicing that, it goes from the head into the heart. It becomes a spontaneous way of living, and recognizing that there's no need to be afraid of anything outside of you. Recognizing that it all starts here with you. So that is the beginning. We're going to listen to the first half hour of this tape. I'm going to set that up for us, and we will listen to Joel. Okay, here we go.
Good afternoon. When the first railroad trains ran from New York to Philadelphia, they made a speed of about 25 miles an hour. And in one of the medical journals of that day, a doctor wrote that this should be stopped by legislation because the human body couldn't stand a speed of over 22 miles an hour, and we would just kill off our population, giving them train rides. And Barney Oldfield, as short a time ago as in my boyhood days, made his reputation as a daredevil racing driver, driving an automobile at 55 to 60 miles an hour. We have come up through that to our present speeds, and recently we have broken through another dimension to where we take it pretty much for granted that men have flown 3 times around the earth in an afternoon. You must realize that each one of these steps involved a change of consciousness, first on the part of those who had the vision to go into uncharted areas of consciousness, of time and space, and then on the part of the entire public in being able to follow them. we were born into a consciousness accepting two powers, accepting the fact that evil is a power and good is a power, and gradually we have even become used to the fact that evil is quite a bit more powerful than good. We are not nearly as expectant of healing as we are of being sick. We are not nearly as expectant of prosperity as we are of long periods of not prosperity. We succumb to the belief that it's too good to be true. What is too good to be true? That good should be greater than evil. This seems too good to be true. But we have had periods in this present century of numerous proofs through the newly discovered mental sciences that good is more powerful than evil. And we have probably in the world 1 million or more people living on that very principle that good is more powerful than evil and that good can overcome evil. We are hardly into that era when along comes the infinite way and says, oh, that's old-fashioned. You've got to leave behind you the belief that good is more powerful than evil. You have got to advance to the place where evil isn't a power. And therefore, you don't even have the need of a good power because you have no evil power to overcome. Again, we've been through this before with Marconi, when all of the professors were seeking to find a way to send messages through the air to overcome some opposition that was supposed to be in the air. He came along and sent his messages on the discovery that there is no opposition to the messages in the air. That is, that there is no opposing power to those messages. In the same way, never forget that this entire world has been brought up on the belief, first, that there are two powers. Second, that if you could get in contact with the power of good, that it would overcome evil. And now you are asked to leave all of that behind and to abide in the realization that evil, regardless of its name or nature, isn't a power, and therefore you need no power to overcome it. This is radical because every religious teaching on the face of the globe is based on the fact of an almighty God that isn't quite almighty because you have to call upon it to overcome the work of the devil or evil. Every religious teaching encourages the reaching out to God, to have God do something to evil, whether in the form of sin, the form of disease, the form of lack, the form of death, the form of drought. Hurricane. Now, think of the change of consciousness that you must undergo in order to understand this brand new teaching, which was given to us only 2,000 years ago. Resist not evil. Resist not evil. What did hinder you? Pick up your bed and walk. Put up thy sword. Those who use the sword will die by the sword. Think. Here is the one and only religious teaching presented by the founder of the Christian teaching that has lain dormant for these 2,000 years. No one would ever have to petition God if there weren't some evil or lack to overcome. No one would ever have to seek the power of God if there weren't a power of evil. No one would ever have to protect themselves with the power of God if there weren't something to protect themselves from. All of this has been lost out of human consciousness. And now, if you are to succeed in the life of the infinite way, you are asked to go back 2,000 years and start to remold your consciousness to the point where you do not resist evil, try to overcome it, seek to get up God power to do something to it. It is radical, and it was difficult then, and it is difficult now. It was so difficult then that the Master said, "Few there be that enter. Few there be that achieve it," because this belief in two powers is ingrained in us, that we not only cannot quite visualize one power, but almost impossible to believe that there are no powers. There is only is, and that which is forever. God is from everlasting to everlasting. All that God is, God was. All that God was, God is now. All that God is now, God will be forever. Before Abraham was, I am with you. I will be with you unto the end of the world. I will never leave thee nor forsake thee. And here you have it. That if only we could remold our consciousness to accepting this, that there is incarnate in us a constituted part of our being since before Abraham was, the power of God, the power of life eternal, the power of immortality, we would be able to rest in this Word. We would be able to abide in this Word and behold the divine harmonies as they appear. But no, remember, we have within ourselves an opposition to this truth. We have within ourselves a constituted opposition, not constituted of God, constituted of this belief in two powers. so universal, so widespread, that it is a part of our very nature. It is a part of our very nature to accept sin as something so serious that we just wonder if even God will overcome it in us. Or disease as so powerful, so mighty, that we wonder if even God can overcome it. And of course, the secret is this: as long as you look for a God to overcome it, it will not be overcome, because you are dealing only with an imaginary battle, and one that cannot in truth exist. Therefore, it is only a battle in the mind, whereas Scripture says the battle is not yours. Stand ye still, see the salvation of the Lord. Moving from the material state of consciousness to the spiritual involves a change of consciousness. The Master put it in these words: ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. But the truth can't make you free until ye know it. Not merely affirm it, not merely declare it, and not merely hope that it is true. You must come to a point of knowing, or a point of conviction, a point of realization, a point of discernment, in which you realize, certainly, if there is a God of infinity, a God of omnipotence, a God of omnipresence, a God of omniscience, how then can there be a power other than that of God? And of course, immediately that inner resistance comes up, which Jesus spoke of as the appearance. And this is the point on which we get hooked, the appearance. Judging by appearances, the sky is sitting on the mountain, and there's just no use of us trying to get across that mountain, so let us stay where we are. Or judging by appearances, the sky is sitting on the ocean, just a few miles from shore, so let us not try to go out there, because we can't get past that sky sitting down there on the sea. Judging by appearances, there is no use of doing anything, because appearances would testify to the fact that there are powers, not only two powers, there are dozens of them. There are material powers and mental powers and spiritual powers and psychic powers and occult powers. You can just keep on inventing names for powers from now to doomsday. There are so many of them. But this has to do with appearances, and the Master said, judge not after appearances, whether it is the crippled man, the thief on the cross, the woman taken in adultery, the boy on the way to being buried. Regardless of what the appearance was, his answer was, judge not after appearances, judge righteous judgment. In other words, do not believe what you see, but remember, you have an inner power of discernment that goes beyond what the eyes see or the ears hear. You know, if there weren't men and women with powers of inner discernment, we would never advance in science, in art, in literature, in any form of good. Because judging by appearances we would always find the germs too difficult to overcome. Somebody has discernment and they discover a remedy for this germ disease and that germ disease and the other germ disease. Former incurable diseases are all of a sudden curable. And so it is that the hopelessness of alcoholism is all of a sudden found not quite so hopeless through Alcoholics Anonymous. In other words, somebody or other has a power of discernment to see what the ordinary eye cannot see, what the ordinary ear cannot hear. And so it is that the Master, in his spiritual discernment, saw that God is omnipotence, and this means that nothing else has power, regardless of the name or nature of the appearance. You will admit in only a few minutes that whatever the name or nature of the problem that is confronting you, it alarms you only because of its appearance. If you couldn't see it or hear it or feel it, you wouldn't have any concern about it. But you see it, you hear it, you feel it, and so all of a sudden there is concern. In other words, there is an appearance that is frightening. We smile a bit at the people who are afraid of ghosts, not realizing that they are merely frightened at an appearance that they do not understand. Perhaps some of them might laugh at us if they knew the things that frighten us. Perhaps in their vision they can see that that which is frightening us has no more substance or law or reality than that which is frightening them. Through spiritual discernment, it has been revealed that that which is frightening you by its appearance has no law of God. It has no substance, no spiritual substance. It has no deific activity, no spiritual activity, no spiritual life to perpetuate it. It has been revealed through spiritual discernment that appearances do not testify to truth. Therefore, appearances must be ignored while we go within and ask for spiritual discernment. Seek spiritual light within ourselves so that we can see, with quotation marks around the word see, so that we can see through the appearance and discern the nature of reality. It is much in the same way that we might look out on the human scene and see a person with a very frightening appearance, physically frightening. And yet, on coming to know the individual, discover that there is nothing frightening about his nature or character, that this is nothing more or less than, you might call it, a distortion of his self or herself. Spiritual discernment always reveals that I am immortal, that I am immortal being, that I have never been born and I will never die, and therefore there is nothing to any appearance that has any right to be frightening, because it cannot change the nature of my true being. which is immortality, incorporeality, spiritual identity, or divine sonship. We are mortal only in the degree that we have refused to heed the Master's teaching. Which religious teaching on the face of the earth asks you to accept the fact that you must call no man on earth your father, that you have no human parentage, that you have but one creative principle, one creator, only one, and that one infinite divine spirit. Therefore, that the nature of creation must be spiritual, must be under spiritual law. Do you not see that in spite of this teaching of the Master, yes, all I can see is a picture of a pie being baked in the oven, and then saying that the oven is the mother of the pie. Just because there is a human part in the production of our human selfhood, we look upon that as our parentage. And you know this can't be true, because behind even those seeds there has to be the invisible realm that sent them forth. So that human parentage is but a process of bringing forth into visibility the invisible life and self which I am. There was a life, there was a self before there was a seed. The seed is only the embodiment of a form. Once we bring about a change of consciousness in ourselves to where we understand that our heritage is spiritual, God is our creator, our creative principle, and our qualities and quantities are derived from the spiritual source. Our parents are just the human frames through which we were sent into expression. We weren't sent into expression by them, but through them. We were sent into expression by our Creator. Your father and my father, according to the Master's teaching. The one Father, the one, yours and mine. We do not have separate parentages. Not even if we're white or black or Oriental or Occidental. We have only one Father, one creative principle. The entire experience of the movement from material consciousness to spiritual consciousness is a remolding of consciousness. Again, in mystical language, you must die daily. You must be reborn of the Spirit. Now, actually, you do not die daily. All you do is let the untruths that you have accepted, the myths that you have accepted, you let those die out of your consciousness. your consciousness remains just what it always was. Only now, instead of believing that the sky sits on the ocean and the sky sits on the mountain, now you look out and you say, oh no, education destroyed my ignorance on that subject. In other words, I have died to those beliefs. But it isn't a dying process. It is a letting of those ignorances die out of your consciousness, so that into your consciousness may be born the truth. In the same way, as you start a regular program of training your consciousness to accept one power and that one spirit, and of course resist the temptation to use that power on anything, because there isn't any other power to use it on, as you train yourself to resist the temptation to use that spiritual power, you are not dying, you are not being reborn. These old beliefs are being permitted to die out of your consciousness, and truth is permitted to be born into your consciousness. But when you're all through, you'll find you are still you. Your consciousness is still your consciousness. Only now you are devoid of some of your ignorances, and you are fulfilled with some truth. Again, superstition only teaches us of a God. Superstition teaches us that there is a power. Why is it superstition that teaches us this? Because it is a truth. There is no God and there is no power separate from your being. It is your consciousness that is this power, that is this God. There is none suspended in the air in this room or outside this building or up in space. It isn't an a God. It is the God which I am. It is the God which consciousness is. But what consciousness? There isn't a consciousness suspended in this room. No one has seen a consciousness out in the air or up in space. The consciousness is the consciousness of your being, and the consciousness of your being is God. This would be highly egotistical if this referred to just one of you. But the fact that this consciousness is the universal consciousness of you and of me makes it truth. That is why religion ordinarily is just mythology, because it sets up an individual who is God and then leaves everybody else dangling in space. This is the height of egotism, superstition, ignorance. There can be no such thing. Otherwise you'd have a God and a helpless universe. My Father and your Father, you understand that. You've read that often enough in Scripture. But you haven't followed it up with this, that the kingdom of this God is within you. It isn't low here or low there. It isn't in holy mountains or holy temples. And the Master never said that it was in him separate and apart from you. Never. He was so careful to say that if I speak of myself, I bear witness to a lie. If I set myself up as different than you, if I claim that I have a Father within me, but you haven't a Father within you, then you ought to do to me what I would like to do to the Hebrew synagogue. That's what he would have said. Why did he fight the Hebrew synagogue? Only for one reason. It set up an inscrutable God, one you had to sacrifice to, one you had to please, one you had to give something to. What happened to all the people that didn't have anything to sacrifice or anything to give? They were outside of God's scope. No, let us reason together. The Master's teaching is based on this. The Father within me, he doeth the works. I of my own self can do nothing. The Father within me, he doeth the works. My Father and your Father, and the kingdom of this Father is within you. And we learn from the poet, closer than breathing, nearer than hands and feet. Now.
All right, Joel. Thank you so much. Wasn't it delightful to hear that all together? Like, I loved it. It was such a great talk. I love it. So thank you so much for joining today in this Discovering the Secrets of Consciousness. And this was a real beautiful consciousness tape too. So I think it's wonderful to share that together, to share a moment of listening to that. So thank you for your part in that today. And so to end this in a way that is, like a celebration, you could say. It's like playing some nice music to listen to. In the meantime, letting this still in. Staying in this frequency of Joel, you could say, and this beautiful light frequency of acceptance of the truth of who you are. So let's start with that. And I hope to see you tomorrow or next week in the next episode. Tomorrow we have 2 meetings coming up, like very early one. For most of the ones will be from Europe at 9 a.m. Central Europe time. And so next week we're in the same time for the Discovering the Secrets of Consciousness. So I hope to see you then. Then it's already the new year, 2026. So have a wonderful, what is this? Crossing over into the next year? Well, a happy new year already. Thank you so much. Thank you for everything.